Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time I'm going to demonstrate how to edit video in Blender. Blender is a fantastic free open source application that's mainly used to create 3D graphics. And indeed on this channel I've got other videos about modeling and materials and rendering in Blender. However, Blender also has a video editor which I've experimented with in the past, and I've been told pretty recently is now far more sophisticated than it used to be, and that video editing in Blender is now a credible alternative to using a free application such as Kdenlive or DaVinci Resolve. And so in this video we're going to find out if this really is the case. Right, here we are in Windows, where I've installed Blender 4.5 LTS, which was released in July 2025. So let's run it up. Here we go. And whilst here we're in Windows, Blender is also available for Linux and Mac, where it works in exactly the same fashion. As we can see on Startup, Blender offers the opportunity to create a new file with one of several different workspaces. And guess what? We're going to choose video editing. And then after that, I'm going to go to the menu and go to Window and toggle Window Full Screen to make maximum use of our screen estate. As we can see, the video editing workspace presents us with a top menu that we've just used, along with 5 areas also known as editors. And we can resize these to our heart's content. Maybe we'll do a little bit like that, maybe a bit like that, and also like this. And if we hover over the top left control of each area, we can see exactly what it is. Here, for example, we can see we have a file browser. In the opposite corner, we have a properties panel for setting the properties of the edit, what Blender calls the scene. And then between these two areas, we have a video sequencer, which is currently set to be previewing any video output. And then at the bottom of the screen, we have a much larger video sequencer, which is set to be a sequencer to show us the what will be called the timeline in most video editors. Although here in Blender, the timeline area is something else. It's this very, very long thin area at the bottom of the screen. As we can see, this is the timeline, and this contains things like our transport controls. This all said, it's important to note that any area can be set to any type. And so, for example, I could go up here to the properties panel and click and change it, for example, to a preferences panel, where we can set preferences for the scene, including the resolution of the display. I can click here and drag, and oh look, we can rescale things on the display, which is a really nice thing to be able to do. Although here I'm going to go back and change this back to being a properties panel, because we'll need it in a second. Now, as this may already have demonstrated, whilst Blender's interface is powerful, it's also complex, which can be off-putting for new users. And so, to build confidence, I'm now going to demonstrate the basic workflow for setting up an edit, importing video clips, doing a bit of cutting, and rendering out a final movie. So, the first thing to do is to set the format for our edit, what Blender calls a scene, which we can do over here. Let's pull that out a little bit, where as we can see right now, our resolution is 1920 by 1080, although we could change that if we wish. We could click here to pick up one of various presets. We're currently using HD TV 1080p, which is 1920 1080, but as you've just seen, we could change that if we wish. And I am in fact here going to change the frame rate to 25 frames a second to match my footage. Next, it's important to note that in Blender, an edit, a scene, always has a defined length, which by default is 250 frames. And this can be changed at any time. We'll be coming back to this a bit later on, but it's a very important thing to note. Next, if we scroll down, we can pick the output location and name for our final video. So I'll click here to do that. I'm going to save onto the D drive here. It is going to be into Blender, tutorials, and I think video render. And we'll call the edit, I think, Stanley, like that. It'll make him happy, and accept. And then a bit further down here, we can change what Blender terms of file format. I'm going to leave it on FMPEG video, but there are other options, as you can see. And if I also open up here encoding and just scroll down a bit more, we can change the container which is going to be used for the video. I'm going to stick on the default of MPEG-4, but there are other options as you can see, and we can also change the codec. Again, I'm going to stay with the default H.264, but again, there are lots of other options. And I am here going to change the quality to high. Finally here, if we scroll right to the bottom, we can change the audio format, but once again, I'm going to stick with the defaults. So, shall we now bring in some video clips? I think we should, or our video will be rather empty. And to do this, we go to the File browser, and it's important to note that unlike in most video editors, Blender does not have a clip bin into which you import footage before putting it on a timeline. Rather, you just find files in the File browser, drag them down to the timeline, there's no clip bin in the middle. And here, the files I'm going to use are sitting on my D drive, and by default we don't see all the sources in Blender. Well, by default, so I'm going to select all sources like that, and we can pick D drive, and I'll get rid of that then just to make things easier to see on the screen. And I'm going to go to, I think, Blender and Tutorials and Test Clips, and here are our test clips. Let's start with this one, which we'll drag down to the sequencer. It'll occupy 2 channels, as you can see. We can move it around as we wish, and as you probably noticed, the reason it occupies 2 channels is that one is for video and one for audio. To play a clip, we can just click on the forward play button down there on the transport controls and the clip will play. Greetings and welcome to another video. And we can stop by clicking on pause as I just did. Although the other way to play is to hit the spacebar, which is a toggle, so we can hit the spacebar to play, in which I'm going to talk about the work and also to stop the playback like that. And this is the easiest thing to do, and indeed using the spacebar to control play is the default in Blender. However, if you use Blender for 3D modeling, in the initial setup you may have set the spacebar to bring up the Tools menu, in which case the keystroke for play becomes Shift Space. And if you have done this and you want to use the spacebar for playback, which is a good thing to do, you can change things back very easily. You can go to Edit and Preferences and down to Key Map, where as you can see we can select spacebar action. And so if it's not on play, you might want to make it play for doing video editing. Now, the next thing I want to demonstrate is what happens when we drag the playhead, here it is, and drag it across the video. And as we can see, the video does change, but we can't hear the audio. And it's often useful to hear audio when you're scrubbing in a video editor. But fear not, we can do this. We can go down here to playback, and we can tick scrubbing for audio up there. And guess what? We can now hear audio as we scrub our video. Next, I want to show you something else about playback, and to do this I'm going to go down to the bottom of the screen first and to grab this little bar and to try and grab it in the right place to actually scale things out like that. I've got it first time, it's often difficult to grab exactly the right place. We can now see the whole clip, or just about the whole clip. Let's try the other end as well. There we are. That's actually neatened up a bit like that, and I'm now going to play the clip for a particular reason. So here goes. Talk about the work I used to do producing cartoon animation. Oh look, it got to the end and looped. Let's take it back and cartoon animation. And the reason for this is that Blender only ever plays a preview range. And by default, this is set to 250 frames, as we can see down here. And we could change that. For example, we could type in 300 like that. It would be slightly longer. We can see that on the screen. Or the other thing we can do is to select all of our clips. Here, just one clip already selected, and we can right click and set preview range to strips. And this will change the end there, and we've now got a preview range it'll play, so it'll play the whole video. It could go all the way to here, and it'll still play 1 million viewers a week, although of course it will loop right at the end. Now, to edit footage, as I've started to show you, one of the ways to do it is to decide where you want the start or end point to be. It might be there for this video, and we can just drag the end of a clip and move it across, and we can position clips as we wish like that. And then if we want to find an end point, maybe the end point's going to be about there. There are 2 ways we could set the end point. One is to drag the end of a clip and just drag it in like that. That would work perfectly well. But the other way to do it, maybe if we zoomed in, it would be more difficult to do it that way. Let's just to set that up. Let's go say like that. We can't see the end there. It might be useful to just cut the clip and delete the extra footage. And there's 2 ways we can do that. One way is to go across here to the Tools menu and to pick up the blade like that and to use the blade to do our cut. There it is. And I'll also go back now to the Selection tool. But the other way, which I think is more straightforward, is to use the keyboard. And so to show you that, I'll first of all press Ctrl-Z to undo our cut like that. And to cut where the playhead is, all I have to do is to press Shift and K, and there we are, it's done the cut. And we can now select the other part of the clip, press delete, and we've now set our in and out points. So, just to make this edit slightly more exciting, we'll bring in one more clip. There we are, like that. These two clips are not designed to go together, but I'll put that one down there just to give us something to work with. And we will cut off the end some point. Let's just do it very, very roughly, like that, for example. I have no idea what's happening in this clip. It is purely here for example, as you know. And there we are, we've got a nice little edit. Let's just zoom around like that. And it's worth pointing out, I have got both of these clips on the same tracks, what Blender calls channels. They could be on different tracks like that. And bizarrely, they could be like this. We could have both video and audio on the same channel, which you just couldn't do in most video editors, but you can here in Blender. Anyway, for now, let's call this our edit. And so we'll go back up to the properties panel to see how long the edit is. It's currently at 300 frames. It changed when we typed in 300 ourselves into the figure down here. But that, of course, is not the length of the edit. It's not the range we want to render. And so what I'm going to do is select all the clips, and as before, right-click and set preview range to strips, which sets the correct value down here for our preview, but it doesn't set that in the render range up here. And so what I'm going to do is to click down here, and we will copy that value, Control-C, go up here, and Control-V. There we are, we saw it jump in the sequencer. We've got the right frame range set for our video. And if you're thinking there should be an automatic way to handle this kind of thing, there should, but it comes back to the fact that Blender is still basically a 3D modeling program, and setting ranges like this is very common in 3D modeling programs. It's not common in a video editor. Anyway, we're now all set up for our edit. We did all the parameters, all the file names and things earlier on, as you may recall. So all we have to do now is to go up to the menu and go to Render and Render Animation. You might be thinking, Chris, it's not an animation, it's a video. This is Blender, everything's called an animation. We will click Render Animation, although we could have pressed Ctrl F12. And as you can see, the video is now rendering out. I was going to speed through, but it's doing it quite quickly, so we'll just let it get on with it. This is just some footage from a recent Christopher Barnett's YouTube channel video. And there we are. I think it's finished, so we will close that down like that. And by the magic of Alt-Tab, we'll bring up the folder into which we rendered our video. There it is, and hopefully it will have worked. Let's see. Greetings and welcome to another video. Yes, we've successfully edited a video in Blender. Greetings, here I am back again, and in the last part of the video I was very naughty. I forgot to tell you to save your work by going to File and Save. Always a good idea to save things before you do a render. And I also forgot to point out you can manipulate the sequencer view not just by using the scroll bar at the bottom, which I was using in the last part of the video. There are also some controls to help with this. So for example, if I select both of these clips, I could go to View and to Frame Selected, which sort of works. It's not absolutely perfect. I would still like to mess around a bit myself like that, and also like that. But it's good to know other controls are available. Anyway, shall we turn to transitions? And for this, I'm going to bring in this clip of two ducks. We'll put that down there. I'll move over there and do a Shift-K to cut it and get rid of the end of the ducks clip. Goodbye, extra ducks. And we now have 3 shots with abrupt cuts at the start and the end between each shot. But let's imagine we want some smooth fades. And if I select the ducks clip and we go across to compositing, you can see we've got a control for opacity. And if I click and drag this, I can take it all the way down to fully transparent, all the way back to fully opaque. And if I click over here, this little dot, I can add a keyframe. The box turns yellow to indicate a keyframe is set. And I can now take the playhead back to the start of the clip like that. We'll take the opacity down to nothing and add another keyframe. And while we're here, let's also go across there and add another keyframe. And finally move to the end of the clip. You're probably way ahead of me. Take it down to nothing and add a 4th keyframe. And we've now got smooth fades in and fades out at the start and end of our clip. If we want to see this more clearly, I can also go across to the overlays control like this and turn off the display of name, source, duration, in fact even thumbnails. But I'll leave on animation curves, which we can now see very clearly in the display. We can see the start and end of our fade in and fade out. And in fact, there are other ways to add fades. With this clip selected, I just right click and clear fade like that. We could be about there in the clip. I could right click and go to fade and select to current frame, and then go across to about there and right click and fade and from current frame. And it would add the fades, as you can see, also doing the audio track as well as the video track. And note, in this part of the video, I've turned off audio recording just so we're not interrupted by the noise of the audio tracks. Now, this is all very well. We've got keyframes going on here. And we can find our keyframes using the transport controls. If I go click there, it moves along to different keyframes, as we can see, but with no means of manipulating where the keyframes are. And to do that, we have to bring up a dope sheet. So let's go across to the area up here, which is currently a properties panel, and I'll turn this into a dope sheet. And we can now see up here, let's just move that across a little bit. We can see our keyframes. I could, for example, pick up that keyframe there, and if I move that around, we will see it moving in the sequencer. However, there's no direct relationship between what we see up here and down there. So what I'm going to do is a little trick you can do in Blender. I'm going to put this back to being a properties panel like that, and then go down here to the video sequencer. And if you note at the moment, my cursor is a pointy arrow, but if I go right to the end and top of this area, it turns into a little cross. And if I click and drag down like that, I create a new area. I'm just going to reposition things slightly like that and like that. And right now, our new area is also a video sequencer, but if we turn this into a dope sheet, like that, we've now got our keys above our strips. And I'm going to take the ends of this and make them line up. Just take that and do that. And the same thing other end, roughly like that. Although, if I actually change the display here like this, you'll see things aren't actually in sync. But do not fear, if I go to the view menu here, we can select a function called sync visible range, like that. If we do the same thing with dope sheet again, sync visible range, things are now properly in sync. If I move that there, you can see it's moving directly. Although I could get this better lined up, couldn't I? Like that. And things should say now entirely in sync. And this is very handy for seeing and manipulating keys in Blender. If we just move the key here, you can see it's working just above where we are. It's nice to work with. And you can always move this down a bit, just have the first line of the keys there to see things. If you don't need it, put it out of the way. If you do need it, bring it up and then put it back again. And the only disadvantage of this is if I wanted to make this lower section larger, I'd have to scale that one first and then scale that one up like that. But I do think it's very handy being able to work with keys like this on the dope sheet above the sequencer. The final thing I want to show you here is you can also add transitions in other ways. So let's go down here and clear our fades. And then I'm now going to select these two clips and go to add and transition and add in a wipe, which appears on its own channel. And if I now move the playhead, you can see we've got a wipe from one clip to the other, although it's going in actually the wrong direction, isn't it? Let's just flick across the sources like that. Always get that wrong, that's me. To Redux, that's correct. Although I don't want to go in that direction. Let's alter the angle. Let's make it, I think it's minus 90 rather than 90 to be going across left to right. Is that correct? That is right. And let's imagine we're in a galaxy far, far away. Let's go down to blur width and make this, for example, 0.2 for 20% like that. And we've now got, oh look, a beautiful soft edged wipe. George Lucas would be proud. That's a rather classic transition. And if you're wondering how we can control it, having added it in, you might be thinking, oh, dope sheet. Well, unfortunately, this is not a keyed effect. And the way we actually alter this is not by dragging the effect itself, it's by altering the clips it's linked to. So if we alter the length of that clip there, we've now got a wipe of a different length. And so there we are. We've seen how to add video transitions here in Blender. Right, having seen how to work with keyframes when editing video in Blender, let's see what else they can be used for. And in this example, I've got two clips in the sequencer. The top one is our ducks. If I just turn it off, you'll see below is me. Hello, there we are. And what we're going to do is to turn the ducks into an animated picture-in-picture. And to do that, I'll select the ducks clip like that and go across to the strip panel over here and open up Transform, where we can transform various aspects of the clip. including the scale, although sadly we can only transform and scale in each axis independently over here. And so what I'm going to do is to go up to the preview window and click on the transform tool, and then go to the top of the image and grab the handle so we can scale in proportion like that. And then we'll use the move tool to move this to a new position, grabbing the center there, maybe something like that. And as we can see, this has altered values down in the transform panel. And what we're going to do is to animate the entry of our picture in picture. Let's find a good place for it to come in. Maybe it should come in as a down like that. So that'll be the end down there. Let's therefore key in Y like that. And then we'll go back a little bit. Maybe it starts about there. So we'll take it up from that position like that and add a new key. And I should point out, you can auto key here in Blender. There's a control down here. If we turn it on like that, keys will be created every time you change something. I don't like doing that. It can cause all kinds of problems. I leave auto keying off, but it is there if you want it. Anyway, we should now have a picture in picture that drops in. Let's play it in real time. There it is. Maybe slightly too slow. We know how we can alter that. We can bring up our dope sheet we set up earlier. Let's grab the key and just move that back a little bit. It'll now be a bit faster. Yes, that came in rather nicely. And it's worth pointing out we have absolute control of keyframes here in Blender. And to show you that, let's just select all of our keys. And I'm now going to press Control and Tab on the keyboard, which toggles our dope sheet to be a graph editor. And just to prove that, if I press Control Tab again, we're back to a dope sheet. Again, we're back to the graph editor. And if I just give us a bit more space in the graph editor, we can see we have got our keyframes. They are here and here. And we've got complete control here. If I go to a key and I just right click, you'll see we can change things like interpolation mode, things like that. There's all kinds of control available. And I'll just Control Tab to bring things back to how they were, because delving into keyframe interpolation is beyond the scope of this video. Now, I thought we'd move on to the tale of the snail and the butterfly, who have agreed to help us demonstrate how to modify clips. So let's start, I think, with the butterfly. Let's select this clip, and if we go across to the strip panel, you'll see we have a color drop down here, which gives us just a couple of controls, including saturation. So if we alter that, we could alter the red in the butterfly. Let's open its wings out like that so we can see the effect fully. That's clearly altering saturation. So if you want to do slight color changes to, well, saturation, you can do so down here in color. However, we can do more than that. Let's go across to the snail clip and go across to the modifiers tab, where we can add a number of strip modifiers. And as you can see, these include control of brightness and contrast, hue correct, tone map, etc. Here I'm going to select curves, which I often use, and let's just scroll down to see it properly. We'll do a classic S curve where we just add a bit more bite to the image, taking it down up there and up there like that. And if we scroll up a little tiny bit, we can just flick it off and on. You can see the effect of that color filter. And using this and the other available modifiers, as we've just seen, it's possible to have control of a reasonable range of clip attributes here in Blender. Now, I just thought I'd cram a few final tips into this already rather long video, and the first one is it's very easy to disconnect audio and video. So for example, with this clip selected, we can right click and disconnect strips, and we can do the same to the one down here like that. And one benefit of this is it means you can rearrange things so you don't have audio and video all messed up together. And so I would much rather have that up there, that up there, that up there, that down there, and that back down there. So we've got video at the top, audio at the bottom, just like in every other video editor. And we can also easily reconnect strips. We can select that and connect strips, and the same for that, and again, connect strips. Next, if you want to watch your video larger on the screen, let's click in the preview panel, and if I press Control Space, that is a toggle to maximize the area, toggle back, we can still press a space bar to play. Yes, we can watch our clip, this rather slowly moving snail. Fascinating. Oh, it's the butterfly. We will stop and toggle back, Control Space again. Let's get the butterfly to open its wings. That's more visually pleasing. And talking of visually pleasing, one of the things I find slightly strange editing video in Blender is having the preview window in the middle rather than on the right. And there's various ways to alter this. One is to go to the areas and right click and to use the move split area command, but there's an easy way, as you may already have worked out, which is to change the type of this area to, for example, properties, and then the type of this area to a video sequencer, and then we'll drag that across like that. And you're thinking, we can't see the image. Do not worry, we go over here and put this to preview, and there we are. We've now got a traditional video editor layout with things as they would appear in other video editors. And I've just realized I haven't left things looking exactly as they were. I should have clicked up here to display the format and associated scene properties. Oh, and my final tip for you is that all of this setup, everything we've got here, the Adobe sheet under there, everything like that, all of this is saved with each scene, with each blend file. And so a good idea when you've got things as you want them is to delete all the clips from a scene like that, and then to save things as a setup file. Let's save as and call it, for example, video setup like that. And if we now quit Blender, let's be absolutely dramatic. There we are, and go back into Blender like that. We could now select video setup, and everything is set up to edit video to our preference. This is a teaspoon and this is a trowel. And if I want to dig a hole in the garden to put in a new plant, I could do it using the teaspoon. It'd give me lots of control, but I actually tend to use the trowel because it's a better tool for the job. And I mention this because when I started making this video about video editing in Blender, I thought I'd conclude that as a video editor, Blender is more like a teaspoon than a trowel. It can do the job, it gives you control, but it's not the best choice at all. And I expected to conclude that because any computer which can run Blender can run Kdenlive, and most computers that can run Blender well can run DaVinci Resolve. And so why would you choose Blender, which is quirky and less featured, compared to, for example, Kdenlive or DaVinci Resolve? And when I started out on this quest of looking at Blender as a video editor in a new light, if you like, I thought, well, the only reason to choose Blender is if you're doing, for example, 3D graphics in Blender and you want to use Blender for the rest of the project. That makes a kind of sense. But if you're only doing video editing, why pick Blender? And my thinking has changed a bit as I work with Blender, putting this video together and testing it on and off over a few months. And two things really now come to mind when I think about where I might choose Blender over other packages. And they both relate to using Blender or using a video editor on lower end hardware, like for example a laptop, where Kdenlive works, but it doesn't scale as well as Blender on a smaller screen. If you've got a high scale factor set in Windows, Blender works far better on a laptop, at least for me, than Kdenlive does. And secondly, Kdenlive is a nice free video editor, but it can be unstable. It can have problems rendering out. I haven't had those issues in Blender. And so I am a bit of a convert towards using Blender as a video editor. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.